All right, everybody. Hey, welcome to Separation Nation. We're so glad that you joined us. For a few weeks now, we've been letting you know about a special guest, Mr. Todd Saylor, and he's just written a book called Wired Differently. I've known Todd for probably, I'm trying to think at this point, that was 2016, I believe. So 2016 is when we first met.
Yeah, 15, 16.
So it was on a radio show, business radio show, that he and a friend of ours who's also been a guest on the show, David Kaufman, entrepreneur and author, and a radio show that they had there in the Sarasota area. And so went down and was a guest with them, and really didn't even know I was going to be meeting Todd at that. I just thought it was David Kaufman's radio show, and had not done my research as far as to, you know.
Yeah, but I remember you walking in.
So, yeah. And you had on some teal green glasses.
Did I?
This man's he's always got some stylish specs going.
Yeah.
But I remember them glasses. And then I also remember you looked up, you said that you had looked me up, and that the word that you come up with for me was Towser. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That I was a Towser. I had to go look that one up.
Badass.
There you go.
That's what Towser stood for.
So, but anyhow, we had a great time on that show. And then, you know, as I've mentioned with some other guests we've had, there's just certain people that, you know, when I met you, Todd, I felt like I had known you. You know, just like mind, like spirit. You connect, you like the people. You don't take you but a few minutes to realize you like them. And so through the blessing of social media, has been able to follow you. And of course you live, which was another thing that kind of caught my attention. You live where my family for over 50 years, before I was even on the earth, is our vacation spot, the beautiful Anna Maria Island.
Yes.
And so, you know, living down there. And so, you know, just some people, like I said, you just absolutely connect with, and sometimes we don't know what that's for. It may be for purposes in the future. And, you know, we stay acquainted, we follow one another, and then, you know, through that divine connection, something materializes and is birthed out of that.
Yeah.
And so we're excited to have you on today. So just real quick, today we're going to kind of be focusing on Todd's new book, which is Wired Differently, that he's released, number 12 on.
Yeah, we had a point where we were 12.
Yeah, number 12.
The highest
Amazon.
we got was 12. We did
That's
it.
right.
We did it the right way. Yeah.
So number 12 Amazon bestseller. And if you know anything about the book world, having your first book ranked that high, and basically just organically. Okay,
That's a good word.
He didn't pay anybody or
look at Justin pull that one out, right? I love it.
So hey, I did go to school a little bit down here.
No, but I mean, I love that word. I mean, it germinated organically.
That's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, author of this book, and I read through the whole book yesterday.
Wow.
Phenomenal stories in it. We're going to get to some of that, but just real quick, a brief overview on Todd. He'll talk more about this, but you know, an athlete, collegiate Hall of Famer, you know, All-American, triathlete, competed for a number of years there. It's a phenomenal story in his book related to that we may get into here later. Entrepreneur, business person of a multi-million dollar, multiple multi-million dollar companies to be accurate, and just involved in a ton. But the real deal, like we told you again, we're not bringing you any entrepreneurs or people that have a system they want to sell you and they've never built a real business in their whole life. We're only going to bring people on this podcast that are the real deal, authentic, have built something that you can actually take and grow and learn from. And so, you know, just excited to have you on today, Todd. And, you know, really, if you just kind of want to do a little better job maybe of talking about
myself,
so,
my favorite subject, right?
That's it. It should be. It should be.
You know, it's funny because I've had a little help speaking. I never had trouble speaking, but, you know, putting it together and making sense out of it and keeping people's attention. And I had a friend, Del Toro McNeil. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. So he's been helping me out a little bit. And I got up and gave him my first speech, and I said, I'm going to talk about my favorite subject, me. He goes, oh, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And so, you know, we went through a year, and I paid him the money. It was well worth it and all that. I'm giving you a shout out, Del. But so I get my first keynote, a big keynote, and I'm out in Caesar's Palace giving the keynote, man. In Caesar's Palace. I mean, lights, I mean, you get on the YouTube, you can see it. It's a lot of fun and everything. I get up there, I do that whole, talk about my favorite subject, me. Everyone just dies, right? And these are all CEOs, you know, boring, stuffing CEOs. You got to bring it out of these guys because they're all making lots of money, and you gotta somehow levitate through all that. And Dell, he just shrunk. He's just so afraid that my favorite subject, me, might not work out so well. But I think that's kind of what we're talking about, Wired Differently, is me, and it's you. I mean, when we talk about me, I want people to understand that, yeah, it's funny, but really, I am you, right? And so I want to embody some of those things and not be afraid to go bald and be silly and be aggressive and get metaphorically naked at times, because you need to be that way to separate yourself. You need to be able to say, I mean, who are your favorite? I'm going to ask you this one. Who's your favorite TV show star from back in the day? Think of a character. You got one?
Magnum PI.
Right? What's yours?
Silly.
What? You come on. You got one?
Geez.
John, I know who yours is.
Who's that?
Come on. Sammy from what's that TV show back in the day? Sammy, the guy behind the bar. Cheers. You like him?
Yeah, I like him.
Okay. So you got that guy, Magnum PI. You got probably a Sammy guy. I got William Shatner, right? Boston Legal. These are these egomaniac guys that just have fun with themselves, right? They're not a bastion to being about themselves in a good, fun way. And I think that's just kind of that part of the Wired Differently way. So just to get that intro out there a little
Hannibal
bit.
from the 18.
Yeah, because he was confident. He was a badass, right? So
Love it when a plane
we
comes,
akin ourselves, I'm using your words, to these type of people. And I think the fact that we're willing to own up who we are and talk about who we are and then share that with people in a way that it can empower them so that they can pull from those special things about you, because you're successful. They want to understand. And those things you gravitate. I mean, you said you remembered me calling you Towser. I remember that now that you told me that. And I did that for a few people on that radio show. But look what I did there. You pulled that. You had an assimilation moment with me. And when you figured out what it was, I gave you that feeling of confidence. Not that you probably needed it, but you got it. The most successful people are probably some of the most insecure people. So I think y'all need to understand that you need to get out there. You need to tell somebody you love them. You need to tell someone that you're attracted to them in a right way. And you need to empower people. You guys are good at that. You made a lot of money doing that. So that's a little bit about Wired Differently and my personality, for sure.
Well, so we got the book.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how did the book come about? What inspired the book? Obviously, you've had a ton of success. But what was your why in writing the book? Mm-hmm. What was your legacy piece? What did you want to leave?
So I think that it's fun talking to you guys. I did my homework on you all. Congratulations. It's a great story, and I want more years for you. It's this whole idea that we never really feel successful enough. I think a Wired Differently person just, it's never quite enough, and you're always worried about the shoe dropping because we didn't grow up with much. I know that both about you a little bit, and I know I had a single wide trailer and 2 babies and a family of raccoons sharing some space with us. I got all the stories, and it's never enough when you're trying to find that component. You want to just be so far away from impoverished poverty. You just never want to be looking at that again. And so we're always stacking. But I think the why was, I know the why was I wanted my children to know what I have done that was successful, was building companies or even the triathlon piece or some of the things that they would build leadership legacies from them on my stories. You don't know what people are going to say about you when you're dead.
Right.
So you might as well write down some things that you might want to be sure that are accurate or something of that nature. In my case, I wanted to be empowering. So that's how it started. So I started writing these stories and just that. And then I started thinking to myself, a lot of people ask me, how did I do it? And I was always bothered by that question, Justin, because I didn't really feel like I did much. But then when you start to reflect on what you guys have done, Come on now, right? You got to own it. You got to really realize you have done something special. And I didn't have an answer. That bothered me. And so I really just started digging deeper. What could I tell somebody of how I did this? And so then I really worked at it and started writing the book, and then it just came together. You know, I told the truth about drifting. I told the truth about the 7 fulcrum principles. And I told the truth about the truth of the gospel. I just told the truth that I was adverse or afraid of the bigger, faster, stronger. I had been guilty of drifting. And I think that wired differently people have a special piece to them. You know, we're all genetically wired different. But there's a certain subgroup, right, that are warriors, that are just different than the rest of the differentiality components. And that's where I felt that I was separating myself. And it was the go-to, the how-to, and the drive, and all those things. But I wanted my children to know that was it. And so how I did it was basically continue to drive. And I talked about my stories. I mean, it's a experiential, motivating leadership success system, you know, and I didn't know it until I worked at it. This experience of being wired differently, the motivational side of it, and then the system of collecting those things and moving it through. So when you realize the fact that you're wired different, and you're willing to own the facts that you're willing to be different, and then you act upon it, and that's what the book's about. I want people to gravitate to the fact that they're different and quit hiding from the fact that you're different. And if you can get out of that and you can bang your chest and say, I am elite and deserve to be treated as such, and own that piece in a humble, excellent way, people will be attracted to you. You'll be able to give back easier. You'll be able to own your personality. You'll be able to own your success. You'll be able to feel good about it. This book right here took 2.5 years to write. You know, I think it's the best book I ever wrote. That's my first book. But it's a great book, and I can't wait to hold it up and show it to people and get my pictures taken with them. And when they're done reading it, I know that they're going to take something from it.
I definitely took a lot from it yesterday. I mean, but backing up, let me ask you this: when you talk about drifting for our audience, tell it what does drifting mean to you, and tell us about the point in your life, you know, where you felt like you were drifting according to your story, and what you've done to pull and hone all that back in and get you on the path you are now.
Yeah, I think we kind of stopped at that. Wired differently people are A-driven people, or the D's and the disc type personality thing that you guys were all talking about in the past. But we drift, and we get ahead of ourselves, and drifting is getting off task, getting maybe full of ourselves, maybe rationalizing certain things. In my life, the pivotal moment in my life, I was 30-something years old, and I was preaching. I wasn't a preacher, but the pastor called me. He was stuck in Chicago on a snowy day, and I was a deacon, and I liked to talk. He said, Todd, you gotta jump in there for me. And I said, great, I'll do it. So I got up there on the stage the next morning, and I wanted to preach about the truth. You know, Christ tells us the truth, and I was doing the fact that the truth is the gospel. But part of the story I was talking about, you know, you need to tell the truth because that's what's asked from us. Not only the truth about the truth, but the truth is Jesus Christ. But so I was doing the metaphor of George Washington told the truth about chopping down the cherry tree. And I was trying to get to the gospel, but as I started telling that story about to tell the truth, it hit me. I felt like I was, you know, I got stuck there on that rabbit hole. I spoke 3 times that day. This was the last service, and kind of hit me in the head that, you know, it's not good enough just to tell the truth. Sometimes in life as salespeople, because I was a very successful salesperson at that time, making a lot of money, selling something I didn't quite believe in at that time anymore because of the corporate things, and maybe we'll talk about that. But sometimes we leave pieces of the truth out, right? And allows us to say we're telling the truth because we're not telling the whole story. And so I was guilty of that. And I was making a lot of money avoiding some of the whole truth on a certain product. And I was really convicted.
We call that commission by omission.
Commission by omission. That's exactly right. Yeah, sin by omission or the truth. You know, I agree. And so I was I was guilty of it because I knew some things were gurgling, and I choose to avoid it, and I rationalize it would be best for them in short period. And you just can do about anything to justify it. It wasn't against the law. It just would have put a real cramp on my $600,000-$700,000 income. So I'm up there, the lights are bright on me, and I'm being convicted of telling the whole truth, not just the part I want people to hear. And I'm trying to get this message out about the gospel, and you're bald, and sweat starts rolling off the top of your head, man. The lights are bright, and it's a lonely place up there when you're trying. And to make the story short, is it all kind of unpacked itself, and everyone got the story they needed. I got the story I had to hear, and I went home that day, and I told my wife we're done with that business, and I had drifted. I had drifted away from my moral compass. I had drifted away from the truth. I had drifted away from the things that are important to me. I had drifted away from the things my daddy taught me. I drifted away from the things that my coach taught me. I drifted away from the things that my mom taught me. I drifted away from my preschool teacher. I drifted away. I just left the core being of who I was because we drift. And we try to find ways to maintain this world that are against our grain, and we drift. And so a wired differently person can embrace that at some time.
So in that process,
it's hard, Justin.
Yeah, when you realize that though, and it's one of the hardest decisions most people make. Because most people's just going saying, "Heck, I'm making $600,000-$700,000 a year. I got a good thing going. I'm going to ride it out." To be able to have not only the conviction, but then to be able to take massive action to say, no, I've got to go a different route. I got to go a different way with this. And what do you do at that point? Realizing it's one thing, but what process do you ensue then? I know you talk about the process that you implemented in your life to take you from there, and then how even past that you hit red lights, and how does that play out?
I think you guys are salesmen, and I have a message called the 5 T's: told, taught, tugged, tamed, or teamed. These are the 5 ways that you want to make sure your buyer. You want to figure out which buyers is this buyer. Does he want told? Does she want tugged? Does she need tamed? Does she need teamed? And it's a great message. So I think one of the things about that whole process of selling is sometimes you get to a point, right, John? Mm. You need to be willing to blow the deal to make the deal. Mm. Look at us, man. We're all blubbering babies in here. So I'm sorry about that. But, at any time in life, if you want to be successful, you want to be wired differently, you want to be like John, you want to be like Justin, you want to be separator from other, you want to be special, you want to be different. At some point, you got to say, I'm willing to just blow this deal to make this deal, because that's how we're going to do it. And I think that's you got to get to that point when you realize you've drifted and you're willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. And I can't teach that.
Well, what you just said, you put it better than anybody I've ever heard put it. You got to be willing to blow the deal to make the deal. Right. When you try to sell something like your life depends on it, you're never going to close the deal.
Desperate.
And desperation always comes through. But when you can get yourself to a point to where, out of confidence, to knowing, and we've got a saying around here: some will, some won't, so what? Right. We always get on to the next deal. But confidence in somebody like you, and there's a lot of people that are there, there's a lot of people that aren't, but to be able to know that I've reached success and I can reach it again. Right. I've sold before, I can sell again. If I have to get in we talk about a vehicle a lot of times. If I have to climb in a different vehicle, I'm going to be able to drive it. It's the same way I've driven this last one. So we know that success is in us, just like it was in you. If you had to change routes or do it a little bit different way, you knew you could do it.
It's still scary.
Oh, yeah.
I think success, and, when you start with a little bit of little, you don't want to go back, but yet you don't understand. If you ever just feel like maybe I just got lucky, and then you got to prove it again because you're just not sure. And there's always that little, I'm not going to lie to anybody. I mean, I just can't. There's always a little bit of doubt. And so the luxury I have of this brand of Wired Differently is, some people have problems with it, but Wired Differently is me, okay? And I'm brave enough to say that most successful people have a lot of these traits. And so when I say it's a Wired Differently trait, it's something I feel comfortable with. I feel like that it's special about you all, the people that are willing to make those deep cuts. They're willing to blow the deal, to make the deal. They're willing to build a proper channel. They're willing to do it right. And if they're willing, that clearly the successful Wired Differently people are willing to understand that they're going to drift, and they look for it, my friends. Now, let me tell you, it's different to ending up there broken and humbled because you drifted and lost everything you owned. That's a difference between Wired Differently people looking for this drift, embracing the drift, going after the drift, and getting it before it takes you down and it hobbles you.
Being honest with yourself, to be able to look yourself in the eye and say, "Now, you drifted, brother."
Yeah, you drifted, brother. You got each other for that. So
when and we'll kind of jump around. I got several.
Yeah, that's great.
So in talking about drifting, when you're talking about that in the book, you've got the story of when you were a triathlete and you were swimming there off Sarasota Bay, Anna Marie Island. Tell us that story for a minute, because that's a great story.
Yeah, so the story about speaking and having the two track minds and actually getting called to the carpet and leaving that PEO world is what it was. It was selling a form of payroll.
And you went and started your own company. That was around 2001?
Yeah, 2001. So I left all that money behind, started over, and felt like I could build a better model. And we did, which was Payserve Systems. We started with one customer, one friend, one adding machine, one wife, And, we went from that to a multi-million-dollar company, and then we sold that piece off, and then we doubled down, and we went from 50-man employee groups to 1,000 or better is what we do in our HCM, or nationwide ACM now is nationwide with 1,000 or more employees. It's a spectacular SaaS software, cloud calculating piece. But the drift story on the island when I drowned, what are you talking about?
Right.
So that's about 15 years later. So the fruit of being willing to blow the deal, checking your moral compass and doing all that was some rough times, right? So we rebuilt, we started over, walked away from millions. Hard. I cried. I won't lie. I cried. My wife supported me. She knew it was eating me up and changed me. So 15 years later, fast forward, Payserve Systems up and running. We're kicking ass, taking names, man. God came through, and we stayed the course, and we believed in those things. But my life, I had a lot of money again, and I drifted again. And I stopped doing this, Justin. So it's a personality trait. We're type A's, and we get full of ourselves, and we're good at what we do. We got a special way of talking to people. We're persuasive. I needed tapped again, And thank God I was looking for it, right? And I'll get to the swim story because metaphorically it's a great story. But see, there's two types of M's in this world. We got all this disc and all this stuff going on. Personalities. Out to me, there's one type of sales, and it's persuasive. We have to be persuasive. Persuasive is not a dirty word. Persuasion is the beginning and the end of about any business deal you're ever going to have. We have to be persuasive. We're always selling something. But here's the thing, and I'm digressing to the drift component because it's the piece of me that I have to always check. It's this: if you're persuading somebody and you're manipulating them, that's bad. That's the bad M. If you're persuading somebody for good, though, it's motivation. So the 2 M's of motivation is manipulation or motivation. So we know that we have this gift, and at any given time, we're going to be able to use that power of persuasion, and we're going to go left at manipulation, or we're going to go right at motivation. And that's part of the drift of our personality trait. So the 2 M's of persuasion or manipulation and motivation. So when I start to feel myself rationalizing or taking somebody not for the good, then I know that I'm not a motivator anymore. I know I'm a manipulator. That's a bad word. So at that piece of my life, I got back on top again and pumping my chest a little bit. And had to bring myself back. And I was out swimming. I was, you like this story. So I was swimming. I was training for an Olympic triathlon. I'd been competing for almost 10 years. And I decided to reverse train. And because I was that bad, man, I could do everything, right? And I did bricks beforehand, and then I got on a bike, and then I ran, and instead of doing it in the proper order, I swam last. And I jumped in the ocean, and I started swimming against the tide in a very tired state, and I didn't think about it. I started to cramp up, started to feel nausea. I'd really got myself into trouble with heat in the Florida ocean. And I turned around because I just wasn't getting anywhere. I was swimming against the tide. Turned around to come back to my bike. And as I turned around to come back to my bike, I started to feel a little better, and I was swimming faster. And I just realized that, hey, man, I was swimming against the tide. I'm cramping up. I feel like crap. And all of a sudden, I'm going twice as fast, and it's been pulling me out into the deeper part of the ocean. And if I didn't get this under control, it was going to suck me under the Longboat Key Pass bridge, and I was getting up in the Gulf of Mexico. And all that's going on in your head real fast, and about that time, my stomach froze up, my legs froze up, my shoulders started to lock up, I wanted to puke, I had salt in my stomach, I had salt in my eyes, everything was going bad. And the harder I fought, the more it pulled me out into the depth of the ocean. And I realized after I went down once, I went down twice, I screamed at the top of my lungs, no one was going to help me. I went down the third time, and I just kind of dealt with the fact that I had drifted out to wrong waters. I was going to die. No one was ever in that spot, but you just know. I know what those people felt like when they knew they were going to die. I'd given it up, not given up, but given it up. I had a brief thought of my wife and some of the dumb things, and I couldn't go any longer, and I went down. And as I went down, it happened I was only about 12 feet of water, but it's a long ways down, and I felt it with my feet. And I don't know how it happened, but somehow, some way, somebody put a bunch of boulders down there a long time ago. And I just started crawling on the bottom of the ocean. I had my bearings, and I crawled halfway to the shoreline to about 5 feet of water, gasping for air, and bobbed my way out, and walked past some landlubbers that were standing on the water side, looking at me like I was an amphibian. Had my Speedo on, I looked like really good, I'm sure, right? I just got on my bike and pedaled home like a 5-year-old boy, but that's my story. And I think that drifting is metaphorically involved in that story. We get out in front of ourselves, we think we're too big for our britches sometimes, and we're not doing that gut check. We're drifting. Drifting will kill you. You drown if you drift. But again, I found a way to check myself, I guess, metaphorically in that story, and I got another chance. So,
interesting piece of your story too is that where you talk about, you get to the red light, the stoplights, you keep hitting, and you talk about, starting off growing up with an interesting fact, and you're still in the donut business today.
Yeah.
Only you can kind of maybe if you want to hit the stats and mention that, but grew up with a family. That's what y'all did. You were in the donut business. Kind of go that route. You're at the same time, you're, All-American, Hall of Fame, Manchester University. Actually, they're fixing to name the press box after you there.
Did your homework good.
And so, all that going on. But with each of those things, you talk about how you hit basically, a stoplight there, red light. And so, but the difference, we talk about on the show separators, okay? Separation Nation.
I love your show, man.
And
it's a privilege to be on your show.
We appreciate it. We're glad you're honored to have you on. But what we always highlight is the things that do separate people that are just living in mediocrity, separating, average. Worst thing in the world you can be is average. The separators that make people really truly high achievers and actually successful. And so, but that's one great part of your story is all through your story, from the donut shop to your sports career, to the point that you went in the line, you fixed to play football for the Lions, and then you have coming out of college, and then you have the broken back deal, that kind of quenches that for you. But you never, at one point, did you ever sit down in the corner and say, you know what, screw it, things aren't working out for me. I'm just gonna, stick with what I know, or with average or mediocre. I'm just gonna accept it. Every time life threw something at you, or you hit a brick wall, you found a way to reverse engineer and come back stronger than ever. So maybe talk about early days a little bit, from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Too, we've got a lot of entrepreneurs and people that want to become successful entrepreneurs that listen to the show. Kind of maybe take us a little bit earlier through the journey, through the growing up in an entrepreneurial family, the donut shop, kind of what it is today, how you were able to come back even when that might have looked like it was lost. And, after years of knowledge, you were able to come back. And basically, that's a very successful business now. So some of the early days, between the sports, football, the donut shop, kind of highlight some of that. How you never let anything stop you.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. So I think it's important that people understand that I own as many as 12 entities, and we have 5 strong entities that are money-making entities. We have some vehicles that collect money, some passive income vehicles, but we have 12 organizations, and we're a 20 million plus organization. And we started with a donut shop, and when we first got married in 1988, and I swore I'd never go back in the donut business. I had an interview with Taco Bell out of college, PepsiCo, and I was the last guy to interview, and they said, we really like you, so we're going to hire you for $21,000 a year. And the accountants were making about $21,500, $20,000, and I'm like, that's pretty good to do tacos, right? But my wife, she wasn't my wife, she was a girlfriend at that, a special girlfriend. There was some commitment ideas there, but she had just taken a job as a cost accountant, and she was making $21,800. I said, man, I'd love to take that job, because I don't want to go back to donuts. But I can't take it at 21 because she's making more than that, right? I mean, that's
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. I'm the same way.
Come on, we're wired differently. Let's not fake who we are, right? I mean, people
don't make more money than I do.
We can't start off this way. So I called them up. I said, listen, that's really a nice offer. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm 20 years old, and I'm negotiating on my first job, and the only offer I had, I didn't, back then you didn't go back and live with your parents. Your dad would say, hell no, you gotta get your shit and go, right? They're not gonna mess around. Now we're like, oh, come home and live with us, don't worry, we'll take care. But no, Dad, I was never gonna call Dad. I was never gonna call. So I said, well, listen, you give me $22,200 more, right? And I'll do you another favor, because they wanted to move me to Chicago. And she was in Niles, Michigan. And I said, I'll take that job in Elkhart. You got a store in Elkhart. And they're like, you will? That's the worst store ever, right? But I didn't want to go to Chicago to be that far away. So I said, give me that $22,000 or whatever it was. And they said, let's do it, right? So I got more money than her. Hey, baby, I made more money than you, right? So, but I moved near her, and that's how we kind of worked through things. Well, I did that for a year, and I realized, heck, if I'm going to work this hard, I might as well own a donut shop, right? I learned what I learned. That was the only W-2 I ever had in my life for 8 months. I did it for 8 months, and I gave them a good farewell and everything. But so I bought a donut shop that had went out of business. I'd been making donuts since I was 8 years old. My dad, Tom Saylor, is a donut maker by craft. He made donuts since the time he was 13, and he was the most prolific football coach Michigan has ever seen to this day. Greatest coach ever in the planet. I just love my daddy. He's still alive, and just love him. And so I grew up in a football family, and he had a really good run and became pretty much famous. And they wrote a little book about him back in the 70s, a little movie about him, and Gerald Ford and Steve Owens and Bear Bryant and all these guys just loved him because he won 72 games in a row, never lost tie games. I grew up with a motivational background. I was doing up downs when I was, I don't know, as early as I can remember. Remember up down? Well, football players do up down, catching footballs. Dad had me doing grass drills, and he'd bring the kids over, and I never wanted to be the first one to stop. I never wanted, I was brainwashed to be a winner. I just, that's a whole nother story. So we made donuts in the summer. So in the summer, we'd go make donuts at a little trailer, and I rode my bike to work when I was 13 at 1 in the morning. I didn't have a weekend off till I was 21. And when I went to college, he ended up opening a donut shop in the college town 4 hours away or whatever it was. So, because he knew I would be there and I had to work it, and so the donut is in my blood. But what I learned from donuts was a system to make money, a system to leverage my favors, a system to understand how to do the 7 Fulcrum principles. And that's what's in the book, the 7 Fulcrum principles. Once you get past the drift, now we take what we've done and we figure out what our favors are.
Now talk about that. So explain to the listeners, when you say favors, what does that mean?
Yeah. So in the book, and it kind of all comes together, but since we're wired differently and we're able to recognize when we drift, or we're looking for when we drift, that's really the cut point of a true wired differently person, is that they're looking for the drift. They don't want to drift. They don't want to be that person. They know that they can be better than that. Then what we do in the book, there's a glossary of terms, and one of the terms in the glossary is favor. And the whole concept is leveraging your favors on the 7 Fulcrum principles. So favors, everybody has favors, right? But we're just not quite looking at it the same. You have a gift, you have a talent. I mean, we have these things about us that we were either born with or we picked up. And we call those in the book favors. So if you were stranded on a desert island and you wanted to get off, what would you do? First thing you would do is you'd go all over that island. You'd look like crazy. You'd look like Gilligan's Island. You'd look for the old typewriter. You'd look like for a flashlight. You'd look for gasoline. Whatever you find, you'd collect all these things on this island and you put them right there in the middle. And you're like, okay, now this is what I got. I'm gonna get off this damn island. And those are your favors. So what I challenge people to do is understand that we're on a deserted island, and we only have so many favors, and we have to work with what we've had. You've heard it before. So we need to leverage our favors. We have to leverage that radio that maybe they could put together, or the piece of wood that's there. So you got to leverage your favors. And so once we become accustomed to the fact that we have drifted and we're ready to be not broken but willing to become better, we take inventory. That's a word in our glossary. We take inventory of our favors. That's what we're doing on this island, gathering our favors. Now we just say, just like you guys did, what do I got? I got a brother-in-law. I got a buddy. I got drive. I know a little bit about finance. I know a little bit about insurance. Nobody's going to do it for me. So I'm going to leverage what I got. I'm going to play the hand I have. And that's what a favor is. An inventory is taking inventory of your favors. And then some of the other terms in the glossary are your leadership palette. There's a ton in the glossary. But what we're going to do is take those favors and we're going to leverage them over the Fulcrum principles.
And the Fulcrum, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I hit them all. So mind, distance, fight, execution, edge, attack, and your sail. So each chapter has a story and it talks about something that's happened in my life or someone else's life, and how you can take your favors and leverage those gifts, those traits, those superpowers that you have, John. And how are we going to leverage them over your mind? So how is the mind going to work? And so then each chapter has mind, and you're going to take your favors, and you're going to figure out how those are going to work around your mind, how it's going to work around this concept of the distance. So that's really the system of being wired differently, and the system of being profitable or making success. And I don't ever talk about money in the book. The only thing I say about money in the book is that made me say that I was a millionaire. I just hate. Matter of fact, let's see. I put. We wrote it. Nick Wallenda wrote something on the back here, and it came back and it said self-made millionaire. And I said, if you really think we need to put that word in there, then let's put a team-made millionaire. So we changed that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's. You can't get away. I listened to your show about money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a measuring device. I think it's a standard. And I think that, again, if we're wired differently, we shouldn't be ashamed of ourselves, our success, our failures, our favors, right?
Yeah, definitely nothing to be ashamed of there, I mean, you've done it. You went out, you put in the work, you've made it. And, I mean, the bottom line is people want to hear from people that have built something. They can go listen to anybody with an opinion that doesn't have an experience, But it's like I always say, I mean, a person with an experience is never at the mercy of a person with an opinion.
Right.
And so, to be able to have somebody that's an authority in your space, that's recognized in your space, multiple entities that are all producing, that are doing well. I mean, it speaks for you. It speaks to who you are as a person. I mean, there's not going to be any fruit if there's not a substantial root, and the fact that, I mean, you're rooted, you've had life experience, and now the fruit's visible and it's seen, and that's what I think. And you're coming into an era now of your life, career, and influence that everything you've built and done is going to start. I mean, it's
Kicking.
Going over the loudspeaker,
Yeah.
and now it's time to take that you've developed and let it go viral through a community of people that want to be, do, and have more.
I'm excited because I know the next show we do together, we're going to talk a little more about that. But that is the Wired Differently system, and you said it very eloquently. John Maxwell, you guys don't know who John Maxwell is. And so, I think he's one of the greatest spiritual, operational leaders that we've had in our lifetime.
Sure.
I know you guys are a Zig Ziglar guy, and from what I know about him, he's spectacular. And I'm more of a John Maxwell guy because that's just where I landed. But I heard him speak. I actually got to see him personally speak, and he said something once, and I really resonated with me. He was telling a story about the different ways that people become successful. Actually, I talked about it being a different way, but all successful people do certain things. And one comment he said about all successful people is he said that everything rises and falls on leadership. And then he looked at the crowd again. And he said, everything rises, falls on leadership. Then one more time, he looked at the crowd and he said, everything rises and falls on leadership. And somebody raised their hand and said, so what do you mean everything rises and falls on leadership? And John looked right at him and he said, everything rises and falls on leadership. And so the point of that little story there is that John gets it. I think the guy that asked the question got it after that. But there's nothing that doesn't need lead. And there's nothing that you're going to touch that isn't going to leave remnants of you on it as a leader. And there's nothing that's going to work in your life unless you take strong, massive action and lead. And I think that's this Wired Differently experiential component that we're talking about in the book. Being brave enough to blow the deal to make the deal. Being brave enough to use a kind of a egocentric word, but being brave enough to walk away from a life of comfort. We talked about drift. We talked about the drift. I'd like to just tell you this little metaphor. Drift is like an effervescent tablet. When you start to drift, and this being brave enough to deal with this and look for this drift, is if you drop an Alka-Seltzer or effervescent tablet in a glass of water, and you realize that that's your life in that tablet. If you start to drift and you drop that, you just look at that effervescent tablet, it drops in the glass and it starts to sizzle. And that is your life when you're drifting, because you went into a place that was comfortable for you for too long. And when you're in that place that's comfortable too long, you've drifted in that place and you're comfortable too long with the things you're saying, the things you're doing, the people you're with, you're not getting pushed, and you're sitting there in your comfort zone, all of a sudden you start being with those people, saying the same things, going to the same bowling alley, doing the same thing, drinking the same beer, accepting average the same way as that. You can be successful and you can drift. You see what I'm saying? All of a sudden, you're in what's called status quo in all these areas, and then the whole thing becomes the land quo. And that's another word in the book from drifting, because if you drift too long, you get out of that comfort zone, you're stuck in a land quo, not just doing the status quo. Everything around you is the land quo.
It's important to know that, in other words, what you're telling people is no matter where what plateau, what level you've ascended to, even on that level, there's still more, and you can sit there and accept that becomes the new normal.
Right.
And then even though you may have more than many others have, you may have done more than many others have, you're still not executing to your potential. And next thing you know, you're in the land of quo.
You're in the land of quo. I could tell you some famous people that I've worked with and been around in my life, athletes, and they're stuck. They're miserable because they're stuck in this land of quo. And this tablet is that. A rich person, a poor person, if you're not, that tablet just dissolves. Right. And all of a sudden you're left with a glass of water with sediments at the bottom because your moral character, your fiber, you're not stretching yourself. I was talking to a banana just the other day. I said, Mr. Banana, are you ripening or are you what? Rotting. Are you ripening or rotting? Because my wife said to me, she says, Todd, why can't we just maintain? I said, baby, there's no such thing as maintain. Right. You're either getting bigger or you're getting smarter or you're either getting...
Well, we say around here, produce or reduce. If you're not continuing to produce, you're reducing.
There's no middle ground. That banana is either getting riper or he is rotting. He's spoiling. And so we have to be accustomed to that. And these people, anybody, you guys can be there. If you're not testing yourself, if you're not... And it's not all about money. It's about stretching yourself with people, ideas, giving, donating, doing things, using your favors for other things, broadening your abilities.
See, that's what people don't understand about real entrepreneurs a lot of times either, is that the struggle that we live in our own heads, even though we may be doing things to go to the next level, are we doing enough? You have a couple down weeks in sales and you're like, oh shit, is this me? Because we know everything rises and falls on leadership.
That's right.
But when we're doing all that we know to do and we're progressing all we know to progress, and sometimes we go through maybe a rough patch or seasons where things are the results are not equaling our effort. And then that's why you say an entrepreneur, I mean, we don't have a 9 to 5. We have a when our eyes, open to when they shut, and then half the damn time we dreaming about it and waking up in the middle of the night. But the constant struggle of, I forget how you said it when it first started, but I mean, are we going to lose the whole deal somehow? You feel like you're always one moment away from massive expansion of the whole thing going somewhere.
Everything's on black or red or whatever you're betting. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good.
One thing unique about your book and what I love about it, there's so many books out there that give you 10 steps or 12 steps. Just do this.
Yeah.
It seems to me like, and correct me if I'm wrong, at the center of your story in your book is telling people to be unique, to not be afraid to stand out, and to take what's inside of you, what you've been taught or what you've caught through the years, or the gifts, the talents, and all, and be unique, but max it out with what you have. Not necessarily do it just like I did it or these steps or whatever, but to take those talents and take those favors, as you call them.
Yeah, I mean, you need to be a master at your craft. You need to be the best in the world at what you do. If you're the only one doing what you do, there's only 2 types of business. There is monopolistic businesses, and there is this perfectly competitive business. I mean, it's factually true. There's only 2 types of businesses out there. And so most of us are not in this monopolistic Droid or Apple world. We're in this perfectly competitive business. You're doing a version of insurance. Not the only one out there doing it. I'm doing donuts, I'm doing payroll, I'm doing HR, I'm doing staffing, I'm doing 20 things of something everybody else is doing. So what we are as wired differently people need to understand that we're constantly should be focused on what can we carve out of this perfectly competitive business differently, wired differently, structured differently? What system can we create that can be unique to us, that we can own and share with others, and just kind of pop out and make it our own version of this monopolistic type of feel? We're not going to be there. Let's just face it. Part of it is we're not in that game. We're taking what we have as entrepreneurs and making it better.
And I think that's important for our listeners to know too. Everybody's always looking for the new idea. Listen, in most cases, you're not going to. I mean, you might be an inventor and come up with something brand new, and you can. Okay, I believe you can. But to be successful in business, you don't have to go reinvent the wheel. You just have to take what other people's doing, put your brand on it, put the excellence, elevate one portion of it that you know that you can bring to the table and do better.
You're all about. I read your whole differently.
Yeah.
I mean, different is a noun. Differently is an adverb. I'm sorry. Different is an adjective. I'm sorry, it's a noun. And differently is an adverb. Differently makes different actionable. Right. And see, that's the thing. We can do it different, we can do it differently. I just say differently because I want it actionable. I want action in it. I want to take that insurance special piece that you guys do, and I want you guys, as much as you can, working on why you invent something that's different about it. I mean, one of the things that launched me in the PEO world was PEOs did pay-as-you-go workers' comp. Do you guys sell comp at all?
Yeah, for our listeners, tell them what PEO means.
Professional employee organizations. Back in 93 to 2000, 2001, we built the second publicly traded PEO. We went from basically 50 million to $1 billion in 3 years, and I personally sold $300 million of that tranche of business. And the workers' comp piece was part of that bill factor, because we put everything in one bundle. They got health insurance and 401k and workers' comp, and it was all under one bill factor. But the point was, when I spun out of that and built Pacer, which is what's called a service bureau, we just do payroll and we do all those things under the client's federal ID number now. The PEO did it under the PEO's federal ID. I helped invent the first pay-as-you-go workers' comp policy with a company called Guard, which was then purchased by Berkshire Hathaway. So myself and Paychex birthed the pay-as-you-go piece, where workers' comp traditionally was you put half of the premium down or 25 of the premium down, and then you did an audit at the end of the year. I had helped to create this first model where the client didn't have to put any money down. We bundled it in the payroll, and we took it out as a percentage of payroll, and Guard did all the heavy lifting. We just pulled it out of the payroll. So it was easy to convert some of those PEO people into that. But what I'm trying to say is I took payroll, which everybody was doing, and said, hey, why don't I grab the workers' comp? No one else is doing it. Right. We took that from the PEO mindset, right? Let's carve it out and let's put it in the service bureau mindset. And that's the way everybody does business that way.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of the book, and I want to tell all our listeners we've got to stay tuned. The next week, part 2 with Todd will be coming out and being released from the time that you're listening to this now, and in that we're going to get more into your keynote, into a program, an experience that you're putting together to help other people know about being wired differently and how you reverse engineered your process and how they can take that process and say, when they say, Todd, well, how did you do it? Well, you're putting together a whole revolutionary experience that you're probably going to talk some about. And so, so we're going to get all that. And then I want to start with, which I think is very cool. We'll start with a little story about you and a guy that just had primetime television special. What was it on ABC, I believe?
Oh.
With Mr. Nick Walinda from the famous Walinda family, the man that just walked a tightrope across the volcano. And what country was that?
Nicaragua.
Todd was there. Yeah. Okay. They're there with him. You can go to Todd's Facebook page and look. Matter of fact, it was even, what's the guy off The Bachelor?
That guy, Chris Harrison.
Chris Harrison even sat there and shot some video with him for his daughter because The Bachelor was still going on. Anyway,
we had a lot of fun.
So good connection there. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And listen, go to wireddifferently.com.
Right.
You can find out all about Todd, all about this brand. and all the connections that you need is there. You're able to book him if you're interested in booking Todd for your next event. So all the information is there, wireddifferently.com. Get the book, go to Amazon, order the book. I'm sure you can order it directly from Facebook, Wired Differently. And I promise you're going to love the book. It was a phenomenal read. Tons of great stories we hadn't even had time to get to, but it's absolutely captivating. It'll keep you. Make sure that you're sharing the podcast. Make sure to subscribe on all platforms, YouTube and the podcast platform of your choice. And we'll see you next time here on Separation Nation.